The cost of preventing Russia further escalation will always be lower than the cost of stopping it and mitigating its consequences. And I hope our friends and partners understand that. It is way more effective to clearly make Moscow understand that a new stage of aggression will have dire consequences for Russia. International isolation and painful economic sanctions.
Well, what can we realistically expect from the West, especially from the U.S., now that Joe Biden is president? Let's bring in Jonathan Katz from the German Marshall Fund. He joins me tonight from Washington. It's good to see you again, Jonathan. What does Washington make of the buildup of Russian troops near the border with Ukraine?
Well, I think there's deep concern in Washington about the buildup. It's not only on the Donbass, but it's also in the Black Sea, Sea of Azov, Crimea. And I think there's increased concern. And of course, today you saw that the U.S. ambassador is coming back to Washington for consultations. The U.S. has been very clear about the need to de-escalate this situation. And I think that in Washington, we're taking it very seriously right now, that this is the biggest military buildup they have seen since 2014. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody, including both in Washington, Brussels, and on the European side, is taking it very seriously.
What can U.S. President Biden do, even with his allies? Because at the end of the day, Ukraine is not a member of NATO.
That's true. And the president has said that the U.S., NATO will not get involved militarily. Again, this is about diplomacy. It's about bringing Russia to the conclusion that their actions, if they decide to take it in Ukraine and against Ukraine, would be against its interests. And so right now, there's lots of consultations back and forth. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine is correct that the U.S. does have tools in its tool belt, including sanctions. It can accelerate Ukraine's NATO membership process as well, further accelerating Euro-Atlantic integration for Ukraine and bringing it closer. But so those are some of the things that we're seeing right now. We already saw last week with an introduction of new sanctions focused on a number of items, which you mentioned at the beginning, including response to U.S. elections, response to concerns about headhunting and Afghanistan's concerns about cyber wins as well. These are the things that I think that the administration is contemplating right now, thinking about. But I think what we want to see right now in Washington, I think elsewhere, is de-escalation. And unfortunately, Moscow and the Kremlin is moving in the wrong direction.
Well, Jonathan, why should Ukraine believe President Biden when he says that there will be consequences if Russia moves against Ukraine? Biden also said that there would be consequences for Saudi Arabia over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and the world is still waiting for those consequences.
Yeah, look, this administration from day one has said that it was going to hold Russia accountable for actions that it took place over the last several years, including, I mentioned the cyber intrusion, but also the elections interference, Afghanistan. And so it actually has a proven record of introducing sanctions and responding to actions taken by the Kremlin. Now, we're not only talking about what's taking place on Ukraine's borders, but we're also talking about what's taking place internally in Russia as well. And so I think there will be a response from the United States and from U.S. partners, including in Europe, to what's taking place. And that has happened before. It happened even post 2014 when action was taken in Crimea and in the Donbass, where the U.S. responded with sanctions and really led the effort to push back on Kremlin actions then. So I expect that it will take place. In addition, the U.S. has already, under this administration, continued to provide weapons to Ukraine. And that's something that's important. It's not only the United States that's doing that, but it's other NATO partners of the United States that are working to support Ukraine's security.
Jonathan, I'd like to talk about alliances in a moment, but first I want us to listen in to what German Chancellor Angela Merkel said today at a Council of Europe video conference. Take a listen.
I have the impression that with Nord Stream 2, we may be waging a conflict that is much wider and touches upon the question of the extent to which we want to trade with Russia, especially in the energy sector. Germany has decided to build Nord Stream 2, but it's a political battle that many see differently.
Jonathan, Merkel in the past has regarded Nord Stream 2 as a matter of energy policy, not a matter of geopolitics. Do you hear her beginning to shift her stance there?
I think there is a number of items that that Berlin is increasingly concerned about. One is clearly the situation on the border with Ukraine, where the chancellor has been clear about the need to de-escalate and to step back. But I also think the situation with leading opposition figure Navalny is also of deep concern to Germany. The fact that right now he cannot get the medical attention that he needs. He is one of over several hundred political prisoners in Russia right now. So I think there's a whole host of actions that Russia has taken that are of deep concern to the German government. Nord Stream 2 is one of those issues that's been on the table between transatlantic allies. It's something that I know that the Biden administration cares deeply about. President Biden has said that he opposes Nord Stream 2. The U.S. Congress has spoken loudly on this. And so there's a potential on both sides. If any action is taken, you could see a shift, a possible shift in the German government. And I expect that the U.S. will continue to push hard on this issue.
If Germany were to halt Nord Stream 2, Jonathan, would that strengthen or weaken the Western alliance vis-a-vis Russia?
Well, I think that, the position has been out of concern about energy security in Europe and about being reliant on Russia as an energy supplier, a supplier that in the past has cut off energy resources when it suited its needs. So I think from the perspective of the U.S., I think absolutely the Nord Stream 2 project not going forward is seen as something that's positive and important for U.S. and transatlantic security and energy security. So absolutely.
You mentioned the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. He is in a hospital now after being transferred from his prison cell. Do you think Western pressure had anything to do with that?
Well, first of all, I have zero confidence that Mr. Putin, the Kremlin, will do the right thing in terms of Mr. Navalny's health. I think there's many people here who have come to the conclusion that they would like to see that Mr. Putin would like to see him dead. And so I think there's no confidence here because his doctors and others are not allowed in. And so right now we're relying on the Kremlin, which is locking up political prisoners like Mr. Navalny for this type of support. This is the same government that just several months ago tried to poison and kill the leading opposition figure. So I think that it's important for the U.S. and others to keep focus on this.
All right, Jonathan Katz with the German Marshall Fund joining us tonight from Washington. As always, Jonathan, we appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.